Good evening and thank you for joining us. The full test results are now in from samples taken last week at the Neskantaga First Nation water treatment facility. The community was evacuated to Thunder Bay after an oily sheen was discovered in its water supply. Troy Charles spoke with the band chief today to get the latest on the situation.
Chief Chris Munias has been busy going back and forth between Neskantaga and Thunder Bay. Last week, he was in his community with officials from Matawa who were gathering samples from the water treatment facility to determine what the oily sheen atop the water was from. Tuesday evening, Munias updated his evacuated members on those test results.
We're still under do not consume water advisory, and that the water should not be used for any purpose. And what they did find is still a high level of hydrocarbons, but it's mineral based, mineral oil. So they haven't determined where the source is, where it came from.
Munias says workers are currently at the water treatment center trying to locate the source, and a tentative date of November 12th has been set for when the facility could be back up and running. On Twitter this week, Munias was outspoken about some alleged joking comments from Mark Miller, the federal minister of Indigenous Services. They have since spoken on the phone.
And I told him, this is not time for jokes. This is not time. This is not a laughing matter. My community people are suffering. They want their water. This is not a joke. We're not happy being here. This is not a shopping trip for my community members. This is not a fun trip.
Kiiwetinoong MPP Saul Mamakwa was in Neskantaga this week to get a first-hand look at the ongoing water crisis. At Queen's Park, he took Provincial Minister of Indigenous Affairs Greg Rickford to task.
To this day, Minister Rickford has not reached out to Chief Munias, playing jurisdictional ambiguity on the lives of the people in Neskantaga is not acceptable.
These are matters that the federal government is seized of. I am involved here in Treaty 3 with some upgrades because there's some overlap in unorganized territory and municipalities. But I've known Chief Munias for a very long time. He's an outstanding chief, and he acted in the best interests of his community, and we'll continue to support him.
Chief Munias says Canadian Rangers could be on the ground in Neskantaga this week to aid the members who have stayed behind. Munias himself is heading back home to his community with no immediate plans to return to Thunder Bay. He says there is no timetable for when his evacuated members may be able to join him in Neskantaga. Troy Charles, TBT News.
Some Lakehead University students are upset about changes being made to the school's cafeteria operating hours. The main cafeteria remains closed due to COVID-19, and today the hours for the residence cafeteria were reduced as well. LU officials say it's due to changing patterns by cafeteria users and to optimize their private operators' resources. The cafeteria operated by Aramark provided hot meals mainly for students living in residence who pay about $6,000 a year for an all-access meal plan. The eatery had been open from 9 till 6 daily, but LU has now scaled that back. Students can grab a late breakfast, brunch, or lunch from 11 to 3 each day and dinner from 4 to 6. And a pre-bagged continental breakfast is available for pickup during dinner time hours. Students can also go to Starbucks in the LU Agora, but its hours are limited. Student Paul Nunez says the situation has left many either skipping meals altogether or ordering delivery food at extra costs. And he says they got little notice about the changes.
On Tuesday at 4 p.m. they sent an email, and then the next day it's just 11 a.m. If you came at 9 a.m., too bad, the doors are closed. I was talking to my HP, which is like the house president. Every house within Bartley has one. And they said that they were going to start a petition, but that's still in the early phases, so I don't know what that would look like.
LU officials say they're committed to ongoing evaluations of their food service delivery and adapting to changing requirements brought on by the pandemic. A private company in Thunder Bay has initiated the idea of offering rapid COVID tests to interested parties here in northwestern Ontario. North Stream Rapid Labs has brought a quicker version of COVID testing to the region. This repurposed mobile unit was created in the last few weeks as a lab-only space with Health Canada-approved testing being conducted elsewhere, such as in a car or a medical office space. The resulting times for the rapid test will range from a total of just 2 hours to a full day. The process was developed in the U.S. and is now being offered here in Canada. Medical Director Dr. David Savage says the demand for service is very high, and they're hoping to get into business early next week.
Our service is here to service Thunder Bay in the Northwest region and anywhere else that actually needs the service. As you know, companies and employees have been affected significantly by COVID. We have high rates of unemployment as a result. And so many companies, I think, are going to ask for this service as sort of the next level of testing and of screening.
So we know that Northwest Ontario is not a high-risk area, and that's the reason that we set out to do this. We want to keep it that way. And we really feel that with our pre-COVID screening that we can really put a stop to any spread before it becomes rampant here.
NorthStream's pricing strategy includes single tests that can be ordered directly through the company for those who are interested. Ontario is reporting another 834 new COVID-19 cases today, up slightly from the 827 registered yesterday. And as Ontario once again struggles with a growing number of cases in long-term care homes, there's word today that Canada's military sat on hold for about a month before being called in to help with the long-term care crisis last spring. Colin DeMello has details.
The support from the Canadian military went a long way to stabilizing long-term care homes in this province that were absolutely devastated by COVID-19. But today we're learning that members of the Canadian Armed Forces were standing by, waiting for the government to call them in. As COVID-19 began to ravage Ontario's long-term care homes, members of the Canadian Armed Forces began staging at CFB Borden. They had been in constant contact with the Ontario government for weeks and suspected at the end of March that they would be needed in some capacity. But in newly revealed testimony to the COVID-19 Long-Term Care Commission, the Brigadier General in charge of the response said they were only called in 1 month later on April 22nd when the situation was already dire. We actually deployed at the end of April, the Brigadier General said, when Ontario and the long-term care facilities ultimately suffered the greatest impacts of the disease.
For an entire month, they were waiting to get the call from the Premier. How many people actually lost their lives? How many people died in long-term care while the Premier waited a month before calling in the armed forces that were at the ready to help us out?
I have a quote from Brigadier General who told the Commission that he believes the military arrived at the right time to make a difference. He says, we didn't come too early and weren't applied in incorrect locations. And we didn't come too late to actually not be of any value to be able to stabilize these homes, he testified.
The military initially entered 5 homes and assisted 2 others for a total of 67 days. During that time, they witnessed horrific conditions. Residents who were abused and neglected, force-fed, left in soiled clothing and crying out for help. Family members have written letters detailing the lasting impact.
I lost my mom during the last 6 months in her isolation. She no longer recognizes me or recognizes the way I make her feel.
And while the Ford government has faced criticism that it did not act in time to prevent the deaths in long-term care, the minister in charge is defending the government's approach.
Our government is a compassionate government. Our government understands the needs in long-term care, which is exactly why it has focused its efforts and made long-term care a priority.
The Canadian military said they only left the long-term care homes once they felt like they were stabilized and that their assistance was no longer required. And the Brigadier General said that they were very proud to help Ontarians and the province in our time of need. At Queen's Park, Colin DeMello, CTV News.
Meanwhile, Ontario's Premier appears to have let the cat out of the bag today, hinting that positive news is coming tomorrow on COVID-19. Doug Ford says one of the top public health officials advising Ontario's pandemic response will reveal new data. But exactly what he'll say remains a bit of a mystery.
Dr. Brown will be out tomorrow and putting out information that we see the curve going down, which is great news. I wouldn't go as far as flattening, but we see it going in the right direction, and that's really positive.
Dr. Brown that Ford referred to is Adelstein Brown, the Dean of the Della Lana School of Health at the University of Toronto. Modeling done by Brown and his team at the end of September had projected 1,000 new COVID-19 cases a day by mid-October. So far, though, Ontario has only seen one day in excess of 1,000. A teacher at a Toronto elementary school has been charged by the Ministry of Labour for not wearing a mask in front of his students. That same teacher had tested positive for COVID-19 earlier this month, prompting the board to close that school for a week. Austin Delaney has more.
St. Charles Catholic School up and running again after being shut down earlier this month because of a COVID-19 outbreak. We learned today that a teacher at the school has been fined after the Ministry of Labour found the teacher failed to wear protective gear, namely a mask. The Ministry of Labour says a certificate of offence pursuant to Part 1 of the Provincial Offences Act was issued charging a worker with an offence under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Safety inspectors were called to the Lawrence and Dufferin Elementary School October 23rd after a complaint. The Toronto Catholic District School Board says in a statement, the TCDSB takes seriously the safety and well-being of all students and staff. The teacher is on leave pending the outcome of the investigation. St. Charles was closed October 3rd after a staff member tested positive for the COVID virus. The board has not said if this is the same person suspended for not wearing protective equipment.
Thunder Bay Police are issuing a caution following a spike in scam telephone calls targeting individual social insurance numbers. The unsolicited calls claim to be from a government agency and allege that the recipients' SIN numbers have been compromised. Recipients are then directed to call another number where the scammers attempt to learn personal information or induce the recipient to make some form of payment. Police advise that government agencies never make approaches of this sort, and they say that you should simply hang up the phone when contacted in this way. While plans are firming up for the scaled-back versions of the 3 local Remembrance Day ceremonies, organizers say they've had to work with the cards they've been dealt in order to make sure that the honoring of fallen soldiers will take place with the mandated gathering limits. Corey Nordstrom has details.
In Waverley Park, the tribute to those fallen soldiers is scheduled to have a much smaller imprint than the 1,000 plus that regularly gather. Les Newman is president of the Branch 5 Legion. He says just 25 people will take part in the Northside ceremony, which will be shown on a live stream on the Legion's website and social media. Local military regiments will pre-record their portion prior to the wreath layings, a moment of silence, and a playing of the last post.
The act of remembrance for the veterans that have gone before us has to be there. And being able to include, even though we can't physically do it, include the members of the military, both the militia and the Naval Reserve, having the inclusion with the uniforms is a big part of it as well. It's just involving the military.
The Southside ceremony will see a return to its roots. Since the 1980s, it has been held in the Fort William Gardens. Prior to that, it was outside at the City Hall Cenotaph. Organizer Ken Malenko explains this year's plan.
Have about 5 of us, maybe 6 tops, gather here at the Cenotaph at City Hall. We will be laying a wreath, reading a brief prayer, playing last post, having a lament and reveille, and that's about it.
Malenko asks that those who have purchased wreaths place them throughout the day after the official ceremony. And Fort William First Nations ceremony atop Mount McKay will take place as well, but scaled back, with a private gathering in the morning from 10:45 to 11:15. From then until 3 in the afternoon, locals can pay their respects and lay wreaths. Organizers for all 3 are hoping the public will respect the small gathering sizes required this year.
We appreciate that people want to pay their respects, they want to come and watch the ceremony, but we also appreciate the fact they should probably be staying home for their own safety, for our safety, for everyone's.
Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
Thunder Bay's generosity was on display once again today as more funds continue to pour in to replace the underground gym. It's been almost a year since the old Simpson Street facility was written off. Since then, gym founder Peter Panetta has struggled to find a new space for the underprivileged kids who he helps keep out of trouble. In just 5 days since Panetta put out the call saying he'd found a new building for sale for $90,000, more than $67,000 has been donated, including $2,000 today from the staff at Pope John Paul II School.
I'm overwhelmed. I think this goes to show you what kind of a community we live in. You know, you can talk all the bad you want. There's way more good than there is bad, you know. So, I mean, this is proof.
We all need safe places, and these kids that Peter works with needs a safe place. And so I think that's really, Peter as a person's a safe person, and the underground gym is a safe place. For lots of those kids, it's a second home.
Panetta says he may need to continue accepting donations even after the $90,000 goal is reached in order to renovate the building, replace equipment, and help pay for operating costs. And a Thunder Bay teenager has come up with a creative way to distribute Halloween candy in a safe and fun manner. The plan for a Halloween mobile came up when there were fears about trick-or-treating potentially being canceled. 16-year-old Matt McKinnon came up with the idea of driving around with candy bags for kids in a few neighborhoods. Now, with help from Facebook and word of mouth, he reached over 600 people with the idea and received a whole lot of positive feedback as well as some candy donations. Matt decorated his car with Halloween-themed decor and plans to hand out close to $200 worth of treat bags for kids. He says he wanted to ensure every child had a chance to celebrate Halloween like he used to.
Well, I just like to see smiles on kids' faces for sure. I like to see, because when I was a kid I had everything, like I said. So yeah, I just like to see them being happy, and it's just good to see that in my community for sure. After everything that's going on right now, for sure, it's definitely good to see.
Now Matt only has his learner's permit, so on Halloween night, his mom will be joining him in the passenger seat to distribute the 300 bags of candy. They'll be in the East End around 6 o'clock, then move to the Westford area at 7:30. Matt, what a great idea. Tip of the cap to you. We hope